they got a full day of lecture and you guys didn't. So, yeah, what's up? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. That way, in case there's a fire drill or something, we know where you are. Okay, so we talked about the situation in France being pretty bad because of the economy. And as you guys know, Louis wasn't a really great king. Why is that? He was an indecisive king, right? So he wasn't able to make decisions very easily. And this is ultimately going to be one of his main flaws. Now, ultimately, one of the things that hurts the situation, makes it worse, is the fact that he decides that he's going to try to have a hand in fixing the economy. And that's all well and good if you know what you're doing, but he doesn't, and we're going to have disaster instead. And so, what's going to happen is things continue to get worse, but the biggest problem by far is lack of food. It's not that France doesn't have food. I mean, it's there. It's just, it's being held in silos by the nobility so that they can raise the price of the crop and make more money doing so. Now, that's all well and good unless you have starving people, which France does. And so people are going to be pretty pissed about this, as you could probably imagine. So they start stealing grain from silos, and while they're there, it's not uncommon for a mob to break out and for them to burn the noble houses down. So the situation becomes pretty tense for members of the First and the Second Estate during this time. Many start fleeing the country, and they're known as émigrés, from the word immigrants. And as they go to these other countries around Europe, they're bringing with them stories of violent mobs, bloody revolution. It's not a good story, and it's going to get worse in time. Now, while that's going on, there's several factions in Europe that are trying to more or less take control of the government, make things work out. And, excuse me, the different factions are more or less along the lines of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, which, what does the word bourgeoisie mean again? Well, they're members of the Third Estate as well, but what does the word literally mean? Right, it means the middle class. That political party that tends to be middle class folk are called the Jacobins, or Jacobins. The political party representing the working class, or proletariat, are called the sans-culottes. That actually comes from a fashion statement at the time of wearing knee breeches. That was a very high-class, high-style sort of thing to do. And the type of stockings you wore with it so that your legs would be fully covered were called culottes. Sans means without, so without socks is what they're calling themselves. What they're referring to is, we're not rich, we're not fancy, we don't have all them fancy clothes, we're just the average, everyday person. So, sans culottes. Now, what's going to happen is, as these factions vie for control of the government, there's really nobody who can make them agree on anything. One of the main functions of a leader is to take groups of people with various different opinions and make them work together in some fashion. And really, they're not going to have this during the entire first phase of the French Revolution. The guy they think could do it is a dude named the Marquis de Lafayette, which he was a pretty popular guy. He was an old dude, but he was a pretty famous military general. And for the most part, people like military commanders, especially when they are victorious, which he was. His most famous contribution to us is that he helped out the American revolutionaries fight against the British during the Revolutionary War. So he was our ally, he was our friend, and because of his successes in wars, he is sort of recommended as a good candidate for a leadership position. But he is a marquis, which is a noble rank. So this, among a few other things, means people kind of turn against him. And one thing, he's a little too old. It doesn't work out, and he doesn't become the leader that everybody hopes he's going to be. And as things continue to break down, there's going to be more and more violence as the more radical spectrum sort of gains more control of the government. This includes things like riots, setting fires, throwing stones, smashing windows, and even going into people's houses and beating them and that sort of thing. So this is not a very nice time to be in France, as you could probably imagine. So just a reminder, what is the event that kind of begins the French Revolution? Yeah. Right. And basically after that point, feudalism as we know it in France is going to disappear entirely. The whole thing with doing away with the estates isn't just doing away with a government body. It's also about completely restructuring society. Whenever you were born into a social class in France, you could not leave this. You were stuck there until you died. So that was all well and good whenever you were part of, well, technically that's not true, because you could actually join the first estate by becoming a priest. That being said, that tended to be people who were already connected. You know, priests, for the most part, was a high-ranking position in the church. So even then, it wasn't exactly completely open. And so by getting rid of these estates, getting rid of these social classes, and making everyone equal, they're trying to completely restructure the way society works. Now, that being said, it's maybe not as altruistic as we think. For instance, the bourgeoisie are really, in a lot of ways, trying to just make themselves the new first estate, or second estate, whichever, the new leaders of society. Instead of having power and authority in society be based upon one's birth, by which families you're part of, it's determined by one's money, one's individual power, which is great if you already have the money. If you don't, it doesn't work so well. So, you can kind of look at it cynically as well in that regards, but the idea, at least, is freedom for all. So, on August of 1789, they spelled this out with the Declaration of the Rights of Man. All men are granted these rights. Now, note, what about women? Are women gaining rights equal to men? No. They're going to fight for it, they're going to call for it, but they're more or less ignored. And the thing is, even the rights they do gain, that they do end up getting from the state at this time, are going to be redacted by Napoleon Bonaparte. So, for the most part, women's rights, this movement, is going to have to keep fighting for a very long time. Now, that being said, that didn't keep women from participating. Even from the Enlightenment era, women were very important in the day-to-day workings of society. For instance, the Enlightenment spread due to salons, which were basically gatherings of people. They were informal. It was like a party, and people would get there together, and they would read from books from guys like Sir Isaac Newton. They would talk about advances in medicine, like that's what's Andreas Vesalius. They would look at paintings and art. They would do all kinds of stuff, and that's how it spread. And women in the middle and upper classes were sort of the social bosses, if you will, of the family. It was their job to arrange these things. So they more or less had a big hand in organizing the Enlightenment from the get-go. And they're going to continue this not activism, that's a game company, activism in the entire rest of the French Revolution. For instance, the thing we have to understand is the king does not live in Paris. He lives in Versailles. And the only thing in Versailles is Versailles, for the most part. It's farmland. It's nothing there. So is it any wonder that he really doesn't understand what life is like for the common peasant living in Paris? Is it any wonder he doesn't see how bad things are? I mean, come on. His advisors are all nobles. So it's not like he's getting a full picture of things. So women who are frustrated by the lack of bread end up marching to Versailles and forcing him to move back to Paris. Now, how this went down is somewhat debatable. I've seen different points of view on it. For instance, some say that when the women got there, they demanded to see Louis, and when he, answered them and started talking to him, he was like, "Oh, I didn't know this was so bad. Yes, of course I'll go with you." And they were like, "Yay!" And they brought him back to Paris, and everyone was cheering. It was like a giant parade. And he was like, "I'm going to fix these problems," and everything was great. Others say these women swept in and were incredibly violent. They were. They slaughtered the guard there protecting the king. But how violent were they? According to some accounts, they were looking for the queen. They were going to murder her. I mean, they were literally going to tear her apart. They were saying stuff to her like, "Save me the eye. I want her eye. I want her ears." This kind of stuff. And like, the only reason she wasn't slaughtered was because some servants hid her away until everything kind of calmed down. Probably it was somewhere in the middle there. But either way, these were strong-willed women, and they marched to Versailles with these machetes that they carried, that they used for dispatching fish, and loaves of bread. Because that they were interested in wasn't all this crap about rights. They weren't interested in all this stuff. They were interested in food. Will my family starve to death? Yes. Well, I'll explain that here in a second, actually. What I mean by that is that he was under house arrest from basically that point in. When he was brought back to Paris, he wasn't allowed to leave. And so from this point on, the royal family are basically stuck in the palace in Paris and forced to basically sign whatever the National Assembly throws their way. At this point, they're basically prisoners. And so things are a little squeamish for the, excuse me, for the members of the royal family. And they're basically going to be fearful of their lives for the next 3 years or so. So that being said, understand what I'm saying. It's like for them when we get to this next part, because generally speaking, when you see this and this colossal mistake Louis makes, you're like, "Oh my God, why would he do that?" Well, because he's terrified, not just for him, but for his own family, But we'll get to that here in half a second. First, this is the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Does it look familiar at all to you?
It looks like the Moses.
Yeah, it looks like the Ten Commandments, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was by design. One of the things you'll notice about the French Revolution is it's not exactly anti-religious, but it is very much the removal of church authority and power in all things. This is not paying homage to God. This is paying homage to man. This is a document that is supposed to replace one's obeisance to faith with one's obeisance to the state, to the government. It's a much more non-secular worldview, if you will. Anyhow, the church does lose a lot of power during this era as they start implementing a separation of church and state. And this is actually one of the problems that the National Assembly is going to have to deal with, because for the most part, the proletariat, particularly the peasants, are conservative. They tend to be more pious and faithful. And so they see this as an attack on their faith, and in response, they are going to more or less divide themselves from the attitudes that are held by the rest of the National Assembly. So for the most part, things are not going to go very well for the National Assembly, because it's too divided, and they don't have somebody who can kind of make things work out. They do manage to cobble together a constitution in 1791, but for the most part, things aren't going to go according to plan. Now, as the revolution continues to heat up, and as the pressure on Louis continues to mount, he eventually makes an escape attempt. Now, quick revisal here. Marie Antoinette, what royal family was she a part of before she joined the House of Bourbon? She was a Habsburg, good. And her mama, Maria Theresa, was the Habsburg Empress of what country? Think about what countries border France. Not English, not German, not Spain. Poland's over here. Think southeast. Between Italy and France is Austria.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Now it rings a bell. Quick geography review there, right? She's Austrian, right? So if the royal family can make it to Austria, they're going to get help from Marie Antoinette's family. Not only are they going to escape to safety, but hopefully they'll get themselves an army that they can then march back into France and suppress this revolution, right? So in the dead of night, the royal family dresses in commoner's clothing, gets in a coach, and makes a break for Austria. They get out of the city, no problem. But as they're continuing along, they start to get hungry. So they decide to stop in a small town and have lunch for 3 hours, like you do, right? And while they're having lunch, Louis is recognized. You know, because he goes to pay his bill, and what's on the money? His face. I mean, this didn't happen exactly this way. Story goes, he was recognized by 2 soldiers, but I just gotta imagine that his waiter, pays the bill, and the person's like, hang on a minute, and it's just doesn't work out well for him. He ends up being arrested and brought back to France, and this time, instead of cheers greeting him, it's insults. You see, he's done the thing that is the one thing you don't do whenever you're dealing with an angry mob. Give them more reasons to hate you. You see, what he did wasn't just try to escape. He tried to go bring a foreign army into the country. I don't know about you, but I call that treason, right? When you try to bring in a foreign army to kill your own citizens. Oh man, they're pissed. Any respect they had for the king is gone. No longer are they planning a government based on a kingship. They're done with the whole institution, and it's just a matter of time before they execute the royal family. But first, there's a conundrum. Because that army in Austria, yeah, they're kind of on the border with France. And Austria issues an ultimatum. If you threaten the royal family, we will end you. Oh, and by the way, Prussia's with us. You know that big scary army that defeated you guys in war not too long ago? They're just gonna cut you to pieces.
How do you put a country on your side? You just set it all up and leave your own like, hey.
Well, keep in mind, oh, right, call them up and be like, hey, bro. It's yeah, I do. Well, think about this for a second. For one thing, all these people, they're related, right? Because of intermarriage. So you call on your family members to come and help you out, which also brings wars between countries into another light because you're fighting your in-laws. You know? Talk about awkward family Christmases. Remember that time you waged war on me? Ooh, you know? So that's one way you do it. Also, it's alliances. It's like playing Risk. If you've ever played Risk, you set up little alliances to help you occupy your goals, but you never quite know if they're going to betray you. So you have to set up situations that are kind of mutually beneficial. That's the political game of things. All right. So by Austria and Prussia threatening the National Assembly, they end up declaring war. So France basically enters war essentially with all of Europe at once. They end up at war with basically everybody. So guess how that goes for them? Answer is mostly bad things. Now that being said, eventually they'll turn stuff around. But one of the things that fuels this, because I mean, it seems kind of weird that they would just jump to war immediately. Why is Prussia involved? Why do they care? A lot of it has to do with what they're hearing from the emigres. They are spreading fear of the revolution because they're telling the kings, if it can happen in France, what's to stop it from happening in your country? We have got to suppress this thing now, or it's going to spread like a disease. Pamphlets like this circulated all throughout France, all throughout Europe. What did you say? Let's kind of go over what's going on here. So these two folks are, as you can see out here, they're the radical revolutionaries, right? They're the ones who are portraying the revolutionaries in France. A man and a woman, right? And first off, what's in their hands?
Knives.
That is, they got weapons, dripping blood, and what else they got? Booze. So they're drunken. You can tell that. Look at their pockets. Do you see what's in there?
Clothes.
Money. Yeah, they stuff their pockets with gold. Do you see what they're stepping on? And you can read it, it's the law. On one side it's the law, on the other side it's the Bible. They're trotting on the laws of God and man. The machine behind them is actually an interesting device. It is a mechanical head spinner. Yeah, it's called a guillotine. That's guillotine. Originally, it was based on a device called the flying page, which is a Scottish execution device. Basically, the problem with chopping off somebody's head is that it's really hard to do. I don't know if you guys have ever actually chopped wood before with an axe, but it's not really an easy thing to do. Chopping wood with an axe, you have to hit your mark, and you have to hit it just right, otherwise things go badly, yes? And the thing of it is, executing somebody by beheading them is a death that's reserved for the nobility, because it's seen as the cleanest way to go. Whack off somebody's head, they're dead, no worries. No pain, no fuss, no fuss. Common criminals were hung instead, which was a much more gruesome way to go. In fact, what do you see in this guy's neck right here? It's a noose, right? Where you kill somebody. In fact, look at the size of his neck, right? Yeah, it's all stretched out. One of the euphemisms, one of the kind of words you use for hanging somebody is giving them a neck stretching. So this guy is clearly a criminal. So the thing of it is, one of the things that the National Assembly aims to do is equalize everybody, even in death.
beheadings are no longer just reserved for the nobility, they are also going to be used for common criminals as well. Can't do that. The thing is, though, there's not enough really good headsmen to do this, and it's still a concern. It's still possibly inhumane. A group of doctors met trying to figure out the most humane ways to end a life. And so they developed the guillotine. It was named after the kind of head of the coalition of doctors named Dr. Guillotin. And they put a lot of thought into this, actually. First off, whenever you were led to the guillotine, there's a table here that's on a pivot, so it sets up like this. And you're put on this table, and then it tilts down, and they move you into position. And your head goes to the hole. They push this thing down, and that keeps you from moving your head so that your neck stays in a nice, relaxed position. Then this blade, which is actually attached to a heavy weight and a pulley, comes down here, and you raise the blade, and as you drop it, cuts the head off of one below. Now, here's the thing of it. The blade design itself is actually kind of important because originally they were sort of like an axe shape, this crescent. But the thing with that is, whenever you swing an axe and you drop it, all of the pressure of the blade is on one spot. So instead of really like cutting it, it just kind of like crushed the neck and popped it off. It's almost like popping the cap off of a glass bottle. It didn't really do the job right. Or to put it another way, if you've ever cut steak at a steak restaurant or something like that, how do you use a steak knife? You just kind of like sack at it, or no? You look ridiculous, right? You slice, yeah? Well, this design operates on that beat. As it comes down, the wedge cuts this part first, and then up as it goes. It's almost like slicing. So it's an easier time, works things out. It's really quite a nice design here. Yeah, it's really efficient. But the thing of it is, as we're going to see, the guillotine is too efficient. It's mechanized. And when you take the human out of it, it's not a human executing person, it's the machine. So we'll just do this all day long. People are being executed left and right. Thousands are being executed every single week in France. It becomes such a frequently used machine that it's almost like the deaths lose their meaning. And when that happens, if people lose their humanity, we can do some really horrendous things, as we'll see during the Reign of Terror. Yes?
What is like the thing in the middle that's on fire supposed to be?
Yeah, that's the world.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the final point that they're trying to say about these people, right? They're not going to be content with destroying society in France. They're going to destroy society around the world. They want to watch the world burn. So, putting them in that light, you can see maybe why some armies are like, well, let's put this thing down. Yeah.
Do you have a video?
Do a what?
Do you have a video of them
Of a guillotine?
like, yeah.
Of someone actually being beheaded with one?
They can be fake, can be.
Well, I'll tell you in all honesty, I'm not recommending this in any way. You hear me, YouTube? I'm not recommending, don't do this. But there are videos of people being beheaded with guillotine because Hitler actually found this design very effective for executing Jews. Yeah, he totally did that. He had one built on a truck so they could drive from town to town and line them up, execute them all, sweep off the blood, move on to the next one. Let's get her done. Yes.
So what if the blade got stuck like halfway through the person's head?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that happened. That happened to Louis XVI. He had such a fat neck, he didn't go through. I'm dead serious. They actually couldn't close the thing all the way on his head.
I was going to ask why.
Yeah. So basically what happened is a bunch of guys jumped on the platform and jumped on top of the blade to sit it the rest of the way through.
So he was just like sitting there suffering with like blade.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yes, 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 yes. We're actually about to get to that, as a matter of fact.
We're actually about to watch a video.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, please.
I told you don't do that thing. I mean, I'm dead serious. The thing of it is, that stuff is out there. You know, people have recordings of some of these events occurring, and I think what we've just discovered is one of the things that I often hit with history is that these were public executions. People watched them with their children. And people are like, dude, who would go see that? Honestly.
Was that like for a movie?
Well, no, they had entertainment. But the thing of it was, there's definitely a spectacle of it. And I think in a lot of ways of macabre curiosity. For instance, you guys are probably aware of the fact that ISIS likes to do some terrible things to people. Yeah.
My brother made a video on it.
Yeah. There's all kinds of videos of people out there getting executed by ISIS, burned alive, chopped, decapitated, all kinds of nonsense. And people watch it on, not necessarily YouTube, but on the internet. And why? You know, why are people going to subject themselves? Because we are all mortal. No matter who you are, one of these days you're going to die. And that is a monumentally unsettling thing. But we're also curious. It's like seeing a car wreck. You can't look away. It's one of those types of things. And I mean, hell, look at entertainment, right? Look at what TV shows we watch. Even non-prime time television has an unreal amount of violence in it. Look at TV shows like The Walking Dead, things like that. Hell, zombies are just an excuse to have people getting chopped up so you don't have to feel bad about it. You know? Yeah. Good question.
It's like that, like okay, the man was like
No, it wasn't a requirement, but lots of people wanted to.
do they sell tickets for it?
So,
Like, do they sell tickets for it like we do like
no, it's basically who can get there first. You know, it was a public function, so it wasn't that they could sell tickets because they wanted to be publicly instructed. This is what happens when you stand against the government, right? But at the same time, there's only limited space, right? So if you wanted a good seat, you had to get in line. So people would camp out overnight, wait for their spots, things like that. As I said, children were brought to see executions as well because it was seen as a learning experience. This is why you don't hang out with the wrong sorts of people. This is why you don't do bad things, because bad things will happen to you. They were very, I would say brutal in child care, although to some extent they were. I'll say this, though, about it. Death was an everyday occurrence. Maybe not necessarily human death, but keep in mind, most of these folks are farmers. Meat, there was no refrigeration. So in order to have fresh meat, you had to keep the animal alive as long as possible and dispatch it with frozen animals. You know, it takes a different kind of mindset. All right. You guys can finish this up on YouTube. A lot of this stuff talks about the political parties we already talked about.
this is the last slide.
Yes. And this sets the stage for Chapter 7, Section 2, which we'll cover tomorrow. Guys, have a great day.